You're not seeing this by coincidence. The very fact that you're reading these words and hearing this message right now signals that something has shifted within your field of awareness. Something has come into alignment. What I'm about to share isn't meant for everyone. It's for those who have unknowingly moved through what I call the final test. You've been existing in a version of reality where it felt like you were on a quest chasing clarity, hunting for answers, searching for that missing piece that would finally unlock your full potential. But here's the part no one tells you. The seeking itself was the test. And the moment you stopped chasing, the entire game changed. Let me clarify. For years, maybe even decades, you've been walking through what seems like a never-ending labyrinth of spiritual teachings, manifestation, strategies, energy work, quantum insights. You've read all the books, attended endless workshops, watched countless videos. You've tried to elevate your frequency, align your energy centers, rewrite your subconscious programming. You've visualized, affirmed, meditated, journaled. You've likely explored every tool out there. And at times, something clicked. You touched something deep. You felt those electrifying glimpses of alignment when everything just clicked. But they didn't last. The familiar patterns returned. The same limitations reappeared. The external world reflected the same story, unmoved, unchanged. So, you tried harder, switched up your approach, wondered if you were the problem. Maybe you weren't doing enough, believing hard enough, weren't enlightened enough, weren't pure enough in your intent. But here's the truth. That changes the game. You were never broken. You were never failing. You were on a very intentional journey, a perfectly designed unfolding that led you to this precise moment. The final test isn't about your ability to bend reality with your mind. It's not about perfecting your visualization or thinking flawless thoughts or hitting the highest frequency possible. The real test is whether you can stop trying to pass a test at all. Let that settle. Let it sink in. If something in you is resonating, if you feel the shift taking place right now, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. That action doesn't just support the message. It amplifies the frequency for others who are also ready to receive this level of knowing. You've been treating consciousness like a skill to develop, like a goal to attain, like a summit to reach. But consciousness isn't something to achieve. It's what you are. And the moment you stop striving to become conscious and recognize you already are, that you have always been, everything reconfigures itself. This is the point where quantum physics stops being a theory or metaphor and becomes direct experience. In the quantum field, there is no divide between the observer and the observed. You are not outside of what you're trying to create, shift, or manifest. You are the field itself, momentarily appearing as this point of perception, having this particular human experience. The final test is realizing there was never anything wrong with you. Nothing to heal, nothing to escape, nothing to upgrade. The final test is seeing through the illusion that you were ever separate from the very consciousness you were seeking. And how do you know you've passed the test? You no longer feel the need to pass it. Reflect on your recent journey over the past few months, or maybe even the past year. Something subtle has been shifting within you, hasn't it? You've been witnessing synchronicities without trying to orchestrate them. A deeper sense of peace has been emerging, even without the effort you once poured into attaining it. Clarity has arrived without needing a method or a routine to summon it. You've started living what you once chased. The version of you from the past would have dissected these changes, attempted to replicate them, maybe even systemized them into another practice to perfect. But something within you has softened. Something in you has stopped reaching. And through that softening, that surrender to the present, you've tapped into a space no technique could ever unlock. You've reconnected with your natural state of being. This is the essence mystics have spoken of for centuries. This is what quantum scientists are beginning to uncover in their studies. Reality isn't an event that unfolds upon you. It moves through you. It shapes itself as you, as your own conscious presence. But let's get one thing straight. This isn't about becoming passive. It doesn't mean you stop dreaming, stop taking action, or disengage from the creative process of life. It means you shift the source from which you create. You stop treating consciousness as a tool for getting what you want and begin to understand consciousness is what you are. And everything you desire is simply consciousness playing with its own reflections, exploring itself through form, through experiences. And when that realization lands, everything transforms. In the old model of manifestation, there's always friction. A sense of distance between who you are now and who you think you need to become, between what you currently have and what you wish to bring into existence. That perceived gap generates resistance, which delays or distorts what you're trying to draw in. But when creation flows from your authentic state, from the deep recognition that you are already complete, already whole, already woven into infinite potential, that resistance dissolves. There's no longer a gap. There's only expansion, a playful unfolding of what consciousness wants to experience next through you. You stop trying to fix your circumstances and instead allow your life to reflect the totality of who you are. You stop trying to raise your frequency and begin realizing your frequency is already perfect. It's the distinct tone of consciousness expressing itself as you. You stop striving to align with the universe and start remembering you are the universe. Embodied, personalized, engaged in this moment. And this is what you've been journeying toward all along. Every spiritual technique, every breakthrough, every confusion and insight, every practice and pause, it's all led you here. The final test was never about arriving anywhere new. It was about realizing that you've never left. It was about remembering the home you've always carried within you. And now that you've returned to that inner space, now that you've anchored into this frequency, the outer world begins to shift almost effortlessly. Not because you're controlling it, not because you've cracked some cosmic code, but because you've stopped resisting the natural rhythm of consciousness moving through you. You're no longer trying to steer the river. You've become the current. Opportunities that resonate with your true essence begin to arise without effort. Connections that mirror your authentic nature naturally find their way to you. Situations that are designed to support the unfolding of your unique gift start organizing around your presence. But here's the beautiful paradox. You don't need any of it to feel whole, to feel joy, to recognize your inherent value. And that's precisely why it flows so freely. The moment you stop seeking validation from the outside world to affirm your inner worth, the external begins to reflect that worth effortlessly. When you're no longer chasing validation through accomplishments, your actions become pure expressions of your joy rather than attempts to fill an inner void. When you no longer resist the way things are, life itself becomes more fluid, more responsive, more adaptable. This is the space you've grown into. This is the frequency you've been calibrating to embody. And the more you relax into it, trust it, allow it to become your new normal, the more your entire life transforms into a living expression of consciousness in motion. But let me offer a twist that might surprise you. This isn't the conclusion of your journey. Passing the final test isn't the finish line. It's the gateway to a new kind of path. Up until this point, you've been focused on inner work, healing, growing, evolving, and every step of that process was essential. It led you to this clarity, this grounded recognition of who and what you truly are. Now, though, you're being called into something much greater. You're being invited to consciously participate in the evolution of consciousness itself. As you root yourself in your natural state, as you live from a place of deep knowing, you become what I refer to as a field anchor, a stabilizing force of coherence within the collective field that helps others access their own natural state more easily. Every time you choose presence over striving, every time you remain grounded in your inner truth rather than slipping back into old habits of seeking, you subtly but powerfully contribute to a shift in the collective energy of the planet. This is your purpose. This is why you've walked The path you have, not just for your personal transformation, but to stand as living proof of what's possible when someone stops trying to be anything else and fully embodies what they already are. And now your true work begins, not the work of fixing or perfecting yourself, but the work of expressing your authenticity, the work of allowing your distinctive current of consciousness to manifest boldly and openly, the work of being so unapologetically you that others are inspired to do the same. This is the work of living as love in motion. Not because you've risen above your humanity, but because you've completely and wholeheartedly embraced it. This is the invitation that arises after the final test has been passed. To stop hiding, to stop playing small, to stop shrinking yourself to fit others' expectations, to finally take your place as consciousness itself, exploring, expressing, and expanding through this one-of-a-kind experience that is your life. And there's something important I want you to understand. The very fact that these words are landing for you, that you're feeling a resonance deep within, is not a coincidence. You didn't find this message by accident. You didn't randomly click into this moment. You're here because something within you recognizes this truth. Your awareness is meeting itself in these words. You're here because a part of you is finally ready to stop pretending you don't know who you are or what you're capable of becoming. Pause for a moment and feel that. Feel into the part of you that is always known, even when your thoughts were clouded, even when your emotions were overwhelming, even when your world felt like it was crumbling. Some steady part of you remained untouched, fully aware, quietly observing. That essence isn't separate from you. It is you. That silent presence that has walked with you through every moment, through every breakthrough, every breakdown, every high and low. That is your true self. And it's been patiently waiting, not for you to become something else, but for you to finally stop looking outside and notice what has always been right here. The final test is over. The phase of endlessly searching is complete. The chapter of becoming something different has closed. Now begins the era of simply being. Now begins the time where you live from the knowing that you are the answer you've been looking for. Where you don't seek clarity, you embody it. Where your life becomes the living proof of what you once struggled to comprehend. This is what true mastery really looks like. It's not about gaining the ability to transcend your human experience. It's not about control, perfection, or spiritual superiority. It's about having the courage to be fully present, to meet life as it is, moment by moment, knowing that every experience is just consciousness meeting itself in form. What once felt like problems become spaces to practice presence. What once felt like resistance now invites you to embody your natural state under Pressure. The people or situations that used to stir frustration or pain now show you the exact places where you're still clinging to the illusion of separation. And as you begin to move through life from this awareness, you'll start to notice subtle but powerful changes. People will interact with you differently. Doors will open without force. The world around you starts reflecting back the inner coherence you're now radiating. But here's the key. None of this becomes a new thing to chase. None of this becomes something to measure your worth by. It all just becomes the natural unfolding of consciousness becoming aware of itself through you. But before we dive even deeper into what it really means to live this, I want to address a few thoughts that may be surfacing right now. Maybe a part of you is wondering, is this really possible? Or thinking, if I'm already whole, why am I still facing challenges? Or asking, how can I be this infinite awareness when I still feel so limited sometimes? These are natural questions, not because they're true, but because you've been taught that truth should be hard, that awakening must be earned, that simplicity can't possibly be powerful. But this is the exact illusion the final test is meant to dissolve. Let me offer you a different perspective on what we often label as problems. These so-called problems aren't barriers standing between you and your wholeness. They're actually the paths through which wholeness experiences contrast, experiments with possibilities, and deepens its understanding of itself. When you're caught in the identity of being someone who has problems, those challenges feel intimidating, suffocating, like proof that you're somehow not enough. But once you see yourself as awareness itself, those very same situations become intriguing explorations, creative invitations, opportunities for consciousness to witness more of itself. This doesn't mean you become disconnected from your human experience. Quite the opposite. You become more present within it. You stop trying to bypass your humanity and instead step fully into it. You come to understand that every part of the journey, the joy and the grief, the moments of clarity and those of confusion, the expansion and the contraction, is simply consciousness tasting the fullness of life through form. The version of you from before would have heard all this and immediately begun to strategize. How can I apply this? How do I fix what's still not working? But the version of you that has moved beyond the test receives this as confirmation, a remembering of what you already know. It's an invitation to deepen your trust in the unfolding that's already underway. And this trust, this quiet cellular level, knowing that you were never broken, that you were never meant to escape your experience, but to inhabit it fully. This becomes the ground upon which your next evolution rises. Right now, as you let these words wash over you, I invite you to drop into the comments this simple phrase. I am the consciousness I've been seeking. Not as a wish or a mantra, but as a clear acknowledgement of what has always been true. Let that sentence be your transmission to the field. A signal that interrupts the old cycle of searching. Declare it now. I am the consciousness I've been seeking. This isn't just a way to interact with content. This is you sending a ripple through the quantum field. This is you choosing to release the seeker identity and affirm your true nature. And as you claim it, notice what shifts. Feel the subtle settling in your body. Feel the return, the homecoming that occurs when you stop chasing consciousness and begin to own it. This is your original state. This is the foundation you now live from. But understanding this intellectually is just the start. Real change unfolds when you begin to live from this place of knowing, when this awareness touches your relationships, colors your work, informs how you face challenges, and fuels the dreams you bring to life. When you're anchored in your natural state, your entire relationship with time begins to shift. You may have already sensed this happening. The old version of you often lingered in the past, replaying events, overanalyzing missteps, clinging to narratives about what went wrong. Or perhaps you were always leaning into the future, worrying about what could unfold, mentally rehearsing scenarios, living in a constant state of anticipation or tension. But here's the truth. Consciousness lives only in the now. It's not because the present moment is inherently more enlightened than other moments. It's simply that the present is the only place where awareness can be experienced directly. Your memories of the past, they arise here. Your projections of the future, they too arise here. All of life, all of experience unfolds right now. Once you begin to identify not as the person having experiences, but as consciousness itself, you naturally relax into presence. Not as a mental exercise, not as a discipline you need to enforce, but as a simple recognition of where you've always been. You never left this moment. You just got caught up in the illusion that you had. From this place of grounded presence, your relationship with manifestation evolves dramatically. You're no longer trying to engineer a future scenario that will finally bring you peace because you found a peace that exists beyond conditions. You're no longer manifesting from emptiness because you've come to know your own innate wholeness. Creation becomes light-hearted. It becomes a kind of sacred play, an exploration of how consciousness might express itself uniquely through your preferences, passions, and gifts. You no longer create because you need anything. You create because creation is simply what consciousness does to know itself. This is why things begin to flow more effortlessly after you've crossed the threshold. There's no more friction, no more push, no more illusion that something out there must complete you. Just openness, wonder, a quiet thrill at watching how life unfolds through you, moment by moment. So, let me ask you this. What's one outdated belief or self-concept you're ready to leave behind after absorbing this message? What are you willing to release now that you remember who you are? Share it in the comments below, not as a confession, but as an act of liberation. Now, let's talk about relationships. Because when you no longer look to others to reflect your worth, to validate your identity, to fill the spaces you once thought were empty, something radical happens. You finally see people as they are, not as projections in your personal narrative. You meet them as fellow emanations of the same conscious field you've come to know yourself as. And this doesn't make you aloof or disconnected. It makes you more compassionate, more curious, more willing to hold space for another's experience. When you stop trying to extract something from others, whether it's validation, approval, control, or emotional supply, you can finally offer something real, presence, witnessing, a sense of being truly seen and met without expectation. That is the most generous gift we can offer another soul. People around you will begin to respond to this shift in ways you might not expect. Relationships once built on unconscious attachments or mutual dependency may either transform into something more honest and aligned or quietly dissolve. And in their place, new relationships will begin to emerge. These connections aren't based on what you can take from one another, but on a shared recognition that underneath the different roles and personalities, you are the same essential presence, expressing itself in diverse ways. Now, what we've touched on here, the realization of having passed the final test and beginning to live from your true essence, this is just the doorway. It's the start of a much deeper, more expansive understanding. If you're feeling this resonance, if what you're hearing isn't just conceptual, but feels like a knowing rising from within you, then you're ready to go further into the quantum foundation that makes this transformation possible. That entire path from the seeker's journey to full integration and ultimately to embodied mastery is outlined in my full guide. Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery. It's layered with insights and practices that we simply can't cover in one video, including the practical tools that help you truly embody this shift. You'll find the link pinned in the comments below. When you're no longer trying to earn your worth through what you accomplish, when you're no longer chasing external approval to feel valid, your relationship with work evolves, too. You gain the freedom to express your authentic brilliance. The kind of work that leaves you drained and disconnected becomes harder to maintain, while the work that lights you up starts moving toward you seemingly on its own. This doesn't mean you'll drop everything and become a spiritual guide overnight. Rather, it means you begin bringing your whole undivided self into whatever it is you do. You act from inspiration rather than fear. You create from authenticity, not from pressure. And here's what's truly remarkable. The more your work reflects who you really are, the more impact and value it naturally generates. Not because you're pushing harder, but because you're flowing in alignment with your innate genius, the specific way consciousness expresses itself through you. Perhaps the most profound transformation happens in how you meet challenges, what you used to label as problems. Once you know that you are consciousness and that every moment is consciousness knowing itself, then even difficulty becomes something else entirely. You stop resisting and start meeting life with curiosity. This doesn't mean you stop acting or become passive. Quite the opposite, it means you stop layering unnecessary suffering on top of what's already challenging. You no longer interpret obstacles as signs that something's wrong with you or with your path. Instead, challenges become mirrors. They show you how much you truly trust your nature. Emotional waves become invitations to stay open, to remain fully present within the raw beauty of the human spectrum. And moments of chaos become sacred chances to see what happens when consciousness through you can't control the external, but remains rooted in inner knowing. And as you shift from resistance into curiosity, from judgment into acceptance, from trying to control everything to trusting the intelligence within what is, you uncover a peace that doesn't rely on anything going according to plan. You tap into a joy that remains steady even amid the unknown. You discover a love vast enough to hold your entire experience without needing any part of it to change. This is what real mastery looks like. Not the power to dictate or control your reality, but the capacity to be fully with reality as it arises. Because your peace, your joy, your sense of completeness are no longer dependent on outside conditions. And the more steadily you live in this way, the more people around you begin to notice something subtle but unmistakable. They may not be able to articulate what's different, but there's something about your presence, a calming energy, a grounded confidence, an inspiring stillness. You're not performing. You're not trying to be spiritual. You're just being you with no resistance, no apology, no hiding. This is what I call a field anchor. You become a stabilizing presence in the collective field, allowing others to remember their own truth more easily. Your settledness gives others permission to relax. Your sincerity gives them permission to be real. Your acceptance of the moment helps them feel safe to be fully themselves. And you begin to see something powerful, that your personal awakening was never only for you. It was a preparation so that you could serve in a very specific, subtle, and sacred way. Not by doing more, but by being what you truly are. Not by seeking, but by embodying the knowing that there was never anything missing. Every conversation becomes a chance to reflect that truth back to others, not with advice or explanations, but simply by holding space with presence. When someone approaches you in the middle of overwhelm, fear, or sadness, you no longer rush to offer solutions or change how they feel. You meet them as they are, from a place of inner stillness that remembers their true nature even when they've forgotten it themselves. And something quiet but profound happens in that meeting. They feel recognized not just in their pain, but in their inherent perfection. They feel what it's like to be with someone who isn't trying to fix them, who doesn't judge their experience, who simply sees them. This is the new path you're being invited to walk. Not the path of becoming something more, but the path of embodying yourself so completely that it naturally awakens others to their own essence. So, I ask you, how are you beginning to show up differently? What's one way this recognition is already shaping your daily experience? Share in the comments below. And if what I'm sharing speaks to a deep place in you, not as something new, but as something you've always known, then consider subscribing. Not just to this channel, but to this frequency, to this collective remembrance, to this movement of consciousness recognizing itself through the beauty of being human. Subscribe not just because it's something to click, but because you sense the deeper truth. We are in this together. Your awakening isn't a solitary journey. It's intricately woven into the awakening of every being on this planet. Subscribe because you recognize that as more of us align with our natural state, the world itself begins to mirror that truth back with greater clarity and coherence. This isn't about gathering more information. It's not about stockpiling techniques. It's about stepping into a shared field, a resonance of humans who've outgrown the identity of the seeker and are now living as the very truth they've been searching for. It's about staying connected to those who are committed to embodying love in action, consciousness in form, the living response to their own deepest callings. And I want to bring this into the real, into the everyday, because it's easy to paint awakening as some mystical finish line. To think that once you've passed the final test, life becomes smooth, effortless, always serene. That's not how it works. What really happens is this. You become capable of meeting every experience, whether blissful or brutal, from presence instead of resistance. You begin to cultivate what I call embodied resilience, a grounded capacity to remain in contact with your true nature even when life gets chaotic or messy. This resilience doesn't come from bypassing challenges or forcing yourself to be peaceful all the time. It's forged through the simple, powerful practice of choosing presence over and over again. Choosing to trust your experience even when it doesn't make sense. Choosing to respond from your center rather than react from your patterns. Choosing to remain in love even when fear tries to take the lead. Each of these choices deepens your embodiment. Each one strengthens your nervous system's familiarity with truth. Each one reinforces your ability to remain consciousness in action no matter what arises. And this matters deeply, because the world doesn't need more people who can only access their calm in a silent retreat or a perfect environment. The world needs humans who can stay grounded in a storm, who can remain soft and open in the face of fear, who can hold compassion even when they feel judged, misunderstood, or under pressure. We need humans who've done the inner work not to transcend life, but to show up for it fully. People who've met their own shadows not to become immune to triggers, but so that when they are triggered, they recognize it quickly, own their response, and return to alignment without blaming others for their emotions. The world needs embodied humans, awake, aware, and fully integrated. People who bring their insights out of the meditation cushion and into Monday morning. People who live their clarity in their relationships, their decisions, their presence. And here's the truth: integration doesn't happen in a flash of insight. It happens through living, through moment by moment. Choices to return to who you really are, instead of falling into who you used to pretend to be. Some days it will flow. Others will feel like uphill climbs. Both are sacred. Both are essential. Both are part of the becoming, or more accurately, the being. Because here's what you're truly beginning to understand. Your essence isn't delicate. It doesn't vanish when you're having a rough day, when you feel overwhelmed, when you stumble, or when your emotions surge. What you are at your core is unwavering, consistent, ever-present, always available, no matter what arises in your temporary momentolia moment experience. The more you trust this, the more you can surrender into the full spectrum of being human without disconnecting from your deeper truth. You can feel anger without forgetting that love is still your essence. You can feel lost without forgetting that clarity is still within you. You can feel isolated without losing touch with the wholeness that you are. And the more consistently you integrate this recognition into your daily life, the more your life becomes a reflection of what's possible when someone lives from their true nature, not flawless, not without challenges, but real, grounded, deeply aligned with the love that pulses at your core. And people will notice. They'll ask what's changed. They'll wonder what path you're on, what secret you're using, what system you found, and your response will be simple, honest, and powerful. I stopped trying to become someone else and started being who I already am. This is the calling that arrives after crossing the threshold, after the final test dissolves. To live, not as someone climbing toward enlightenment, but as someone anchored in being a living bridge between the old pattern of striving and the new way of embodying. And as more individuals step into this space, the collective begins to shift. As more people move from seeking to being, we approach a tipping Point, a critical mass of awakened embodiment that begins to influence the entire human experience. This is why you're here. This is why you've walked through every initiation, every shedding, every shift. Not only for your personal healing, but because your transformation is part of a much larger movement, the Great Awakening of our species. A realization that we are not fractured individuals fighting to survive in a disconnected world, but unified expressions of one consciousness, exploring itself through countless unique forms. From this awareness, every action becomes an invitation. Will you honor your truth or forget it? Each moment becomes a fork in the road. Embody your wholeness or fall back into the illusion of separation. And the more often you choose remembrance, the more your external world begins to mirror that inner knowing. Consider returning to this transmission tomorrow morning. Let it reattune you to this frequency before you face the day, or pass it along to someone who feels ready to shift, not as a way of teaching, but as a gift. Because when you share from this place, you're not just offering information. You're transmitting energy. You're sending out ripples that amplify the field of awakening, while simultaneously anchoring yourself deeper into your own embodiment of truth. Your act of sharing isn't just an interaction. It's a signal to the field that you're ready to live as your truest self. The journey now isn't about trying to hold on to this awareness with effort, but about trusting it enough to let it guide you. You stop trying to orchestrate your life from control and instead allow it to unfold as an authentic expression of your being. This means you no longer attempt to regulate how you feel. You feel fully, knowing that every emotion is simply energy moving through consciousness. You stop trying to manipulate your thoughts and instead clarity begins to arise naturally as you understand thoughts as momentary expressions within awareness. You stop trying to predict or steer your path and instead you show up for life wholeheartedly, knowing every moment is a sacred opportunity for consciousness to experience itself more deeply. You begin to live as embodied prayer, as grounded presence, as love in motion. Not because you've escaped your human nature, but because you've remembered that your humanness is one of the ways divinity expresses itself. And the more consistently you embody this truth, the more you start noticing that others around you are going through their own initiations. You begin to sense the subtle cues, the quiet shifts that show when someone is ready to stop striving and begin simply being. If what I'm saying resonates at the level of recognition rather than hope, then I invite you to not just follow this message, but to align with this frequency, to participate in this field of beings waking up to themselves through the miracle of being human. Subscribe not as a passive consumer, but as an active declaration, we are in this together. Your awakening is part of something much larger, a collective remembering And the more of us who live from this natural, effortless knowing, the more the world will begin to mirror that knowing back to us. This is no longer about acquiring more knowledge or chasing more spiritual tools. This is about staying rooted in a field of truth, with others who have moved beyond the seeker's loop and into the quiet power of presence, with others who are living as love made visible, as consciousness shaped into form, as the embodied answer to their own longing. And here's what I know without a doubt. You didn't come here to master life as a puzzle to solve. You came to experience it, feel it, live it deeply, vividly, unapologetically. You didn't come to bypass your humanity. You came to infuse it with the radiance of your divine nature. You didn't come to find your way somewhere else. You came to be fully here. Recognizing that truth, that's the final test. Living from that truth, that's your sacred offering. As we come to the close of this transmission, I'll leave you with this. Each day is an open doorway, not a binary of right or wrong, sacred or mundane, enlightened or not, but a choice between remembering and forgetting, between embodiment and performance, between living as the truth of who you are, or playing the part of who you think you're supposed to be. That choice is always right here. The invitation never disappears. Your true self is always accessible, not through effort but through recognition, not through striving but through presence. Because what you are, you already are. You are both the witness and what is witnessed, the dreamer and the unfolding dream, the question and the response, the seeker and what was always sought, the giver and the gift. You are awareness itself, choosing to know itself through this unique human expression. In this very moment, in this exact configuration, and that choice to be here in a body, participating in this grand exploration of consciousness. Meeting itself is the most sacred spiritual act of all. So live it fully. Trust it entirely. Embody it boldly. And before we part ways for now, I invite you to share one word in the comments. One word that reflects the energy you're ready to embody now. Not an aspiration for the future, not a goal, but a declaration of who you're choosing to be. In this moment, let this word become your energetic imprint on the field. Your signature of alignment, not for someday, but for today. Drop that word now. And if your heart feels called to subscribe, let it be more than just a click. Let it be your way of saying yes to this frequency, to this space of living truth, to this global movement of conscious beings who have crossed the threshold and now walk the path of embodiment. Because the more of us who live from this awareness, the more that awareness echoes through the shared field of humanity. The more of us who choose to be what we already are, the more accessible it becomes for others to remember. This is how transformation happens. Not through struggle, not through fixing what was never broken, but through each of us reclaiming our True nature and living it. Unapologetically. The final test ended. The moment you stopped needing to prove yourself. Now begins the real journey. Showing up as the extraordinary presence you've always been, masked for a time as someone trying to figure it all out. Welcome back to yourself. Welcome to life beyond striving. Welcome to the life that was always yours to live. The test is done. The embodiment begins now. And now that you've seen how this shift rewrites your relationship with reality itself, you're ready for the next step. Discovering that manifestation works in reverse of everything you've been taught. The observer mirror reveals how life continually reflects your deepest self-beliefs. Once you see this clearly, you gain access to a level of conscious creation few ever truly unlock.